Hello YouTube and welcome to my channel. In the first part of this series I made 3 arguments for the existence of a necessary substance. In this part I will defend those arguments from some criticisms and demonstrate that this necessary substance is the uncaused cause. If you didn't watch the previous video, I recommend watching it because this one picks up where the last one left off. Link is in the description. In response to my last video, Robin Dude commented the following. There are a couple of interesting nuances in this comment, and I will address them all later. But for our purposes right now, we can summarize the objection as an assertion that an infinite causal regress seems possible. If an infinite causal regress is possible, then it does not seem necessary to posit the existence of a necessary substance as a terminus for this infinite causal regress. A similar objection was made by Peter de Tucker in his debate against the distributist when he asked, "What caused the first cause?" Asking what caused the first cause is functionally equivalent to positing the existence of an infinite regress, since it is basically denying the possibility of a necessary substance as a terminus for an infinite regress. Thus, it seems worthwhile to ask, is it possible to prove the impossibility of causal series? St. Thomas Aquinas, who was the inventor of the first argument that this comment is responding to, would argue yes and no. To address this argument, we have to consider 2 different kinds of causal series, sequential causation and simultaneous causation. A sequential causal series is like your parents causing you to exist, your grandparents causing your parents to exist, your great-grandparents causing your grandparents to exist, and on and on. A simultaneous causation is like a system of pulleys. The sequential series may in theory be infinite, the simultaneous may not be. The difference is that in a sequential series, the cause of one thing within the series does not necessitate the next causal element in the series. For example, the fact that your grandparents had your parents does not mean your parents had to cause you to exist. Your parents could have chosen not to have kids. A simultaneous causal series is the opposite. In a pulley system, the act of one pulley pulling is what causes the other pulleys to pull as well. The actualization of any one pulley requires the actualization of every single pulley in the system. Or think about a train. The motion of the caboose of the train is in one sense caused by the motion of the train car directly in front of it. But this is only because the train car is causally being moved by the train's engine at the same time that it is causing the caboose to move. Thus, while on one level, the causal effect of a train might be shown like this, on a deeper level, it actually looks like this. If your parent were to cease to exist after you were born, you would still exist and have the power to have kids. If a train's engine ceased to exist after starting to move a train of cars, no cars would have the causal power over the cars after them, and the train would eventually come to a stop. While sequential causal series obviously do exist in the universe, it is not these causal series which the argument is directed against. It is cases of simultaneous causation. That is to say, when the de ante argument says that causal series cannot be infinite, it is referring to cases of simultaneous cause and effect. So while your parents in one sense did cause you to exist, they are not your esse, what is keeping you in existence right now. The question is, what is keeping you in existence? What is the cause of your continued existence, as opposed to you not existing right now? Now you might say, well, that's just the way our universe works. Things don't just randomly appear and disappear out of existence. And that's kind of the point. Our universe seems to function by this principle of cause and effect. So it makes sense to ask, what specifically is causing your existence right now? Now, a typical answer might be, well, my body is. My organs, bones, and other body parts work together to ensure I continue to exist. Cool. Now, what is causing those to exist? Your cells? What is causing your cells to exist? Subatomic particles? Fine, we can keep going. Point is, that can't be an infinite series because this is a case of simultaneous causation. It requires a first cause. Your body requires cells to make you exist, your cells require subatomic particles to make your body exist, so on and so forth. The causal force of each cause is found in a prior cause. Thus, there must be a first cause. Crocoduck also responded to the de ante argument of Thomas Aquinas. He argued that the conclusion of the argument, that there must be an entity whose essence is identical to its existence, appears to be a case of special pleading. After all, like in the example Crocoduck used, Why couldn't we say that existence is part of the essence of Clifford, and therefore claim Clifford must be a necessary substance? If we can do that with Clifford, we should be able to do that with everything. This leads either into absurdities or a case of special pleading. Peter de Tucker made a similar objection to the distributist in the same debate when he asked, could there be more than one uncaused cause? Both of these objections, in different ways, attack the notion of a necessary substance by trying to deal with the notion of existence itself being the essence of a substance. That leads quite nicely into what I'd like to prove in this video, that the necessary substance of which we proved the existence of in the last video is simple, unique, and the uncaused cause. To do that, though, I'm going to have to talk about a hierarchy of sciences. Now, how do we distinguish different sciences from each other? We do so primarily on the object of study. The scientist that studies chemicals is called a chemist. The scientist that studies animals is called a zoologist. And a scientist that studies computers is called a computer scientist. Now this seems pretty obvious, but we run into a problem. It appears that different scientists appear to study the same thing. For example, a cetologist studies whales, but so does a zoologist and a biologist. Does that mean cetology, the study of whales, zoology, the study of animals, and biology, the study of life, are actually the same science? Obviously not, because they study whales in different ways. A cetologist studies whales as whales, or to use philosophical language, whales qua whales, as distinguished from other animals. A zoologist studies whales as a type of animal, or as whale qua animal, as distinguished to other living things. And a biologist studies whales qua living things, as opposed to non-living things. Now we can actually extend this hierarchy of sciences even further. A chemist could study whales qua chemicals, as opposed to non-chemical substances. Going even farther, a physicist could study whales qua matter, as opposed to something immaterial. Thus, sciences can be shown to proceed from what is most specific to what is most general in a hierarchy. A whale is more specific than animals, which is more specific than living things, which is more specific than chemicals, which is more specific than material things. But is physics the most general science possible? Can there be an even more general science? What would the science that studies both material and immaterial things be? Well, that would be the study of metaphysics, which is what I'm doing right now. Metaphysics studies the world and objects in it, not as any particular thing, but as thing qua thing. Let's take the example of Clifford, the big red dog that Crocoduck mentioned. Crocoduck asserts that the argument for a necessary substance can be shown to be false through a reductio ad absurdum by claiming that the essence of Clifford is that he is big, red, a dog, and he exists necessarily. Therefore, Clifford must exist, yet he doesn't. So asserting existence as a property doesn't seem to make sense. Yet this is missing the point. It's treating all these different properties of Clifford the same, when in reality they are not. Ignoring the official canon of the story, which complicates things, let's assume that Clifford is a member of a species of dog that are naturally big and red. His bigness and redness are therefore caused by the fact that he's that species of dog. Why? Well, dogs by their nature are material. Material beings have to be of a certain color and size. You can't have a material being that has no color and no size. And if you had a canine scientist, they could probably explain why that breed of dog is that color and size. However, existing in all places and all times is not a property of dogs. Because of that, if Clifford was a necessary substance, that necessity would have to come from a different essence as opposed to his dogness. Thus, we could create this chart to map Clifford. This creates a problem though, because then being a dog and being necessary are not caused by the same principle, and another principle must be posited to explain their coinciding in the same substance. Therefore, Clifford is a contingent entity dependent on whatever it is that caused dogness and necessity to be in the same hypostasis. Hypostasis is another word for substance. That's a lot of philosophical jargon, but the basic point is, being a dog doesn't make you a necessary entity, nor does being a necessary entity make you a dog. Therefore, another causal factor must exist, which means Clifford's existence, if he is a necessary entity, is dependent on a prior necessary entity. This is obviously not just true about Clifford, but true about any entity with characteristics that don't flow out of being a necessary entity. What does this mean? It means that if our necessary substance is complex, then it is contingent on a prior necessary entity. This creates a simultaneous infinite regress of necessary entities, and as we said before, those can't exist. Or it means that the regress terminates in a simple necessary entity. What do we mean by simple? Basically, that it's not a member of any species of being. It is pure being. Or as Aquinas put it, ipsum esse subsistens, meaning being itself subsisting. By the way, just as an aside, a lot of people write off the Bible as folksy fairy tales having little to do with systematic theology or metaphysics. But do you remember the story of Moses and the burning bush? Moses asks what name he should call God so the Israelites know it's him. What did God say? I am who am. I am who am. That phrase, obviously the Hebrew original, is where the name Yahweh comes from. God's name that he gave to Moses testifies to God's nature. I am who am. God is the act of existing, pure act, no potential or privation of his being. He is pure being itself. And this brings us to why there can only be one entity like this, because for there to be two of this thing, they would have to be in some way different. But if they are different in some way, then there must be some qualitative difference between them. But that would require one of them to have an accidental, non-necessary quality. But an accidental, non-necessary quality would make that being complex, and therefore a member of a species of being, not pure being itself. Thus, there can only be one entity like this. And if there is only one entity like this, then it follows that it is the cause of every other entity, which means it is the uncaused cause. Thus, in this video, we have moved from having the existence of a necessary substance to the existence of a unique uncaused cause, that is pure being, being itself subsisting. In the next video, we will show how from being itself subsisting, we can show that this being is an immaterial mind. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Until next time, I'm Benedict the 17th. Go with God.